Alright, so I just got done watching Euphoria Season 3, Episode 4, and we are here to do our review, our recap, and our breakdown for today's episode. So let's go ahead and begin with the title of today's episode. That would be Kitty Likes to Dance. And this episode opens up with Rue in the back of a police car. Of course, we got to see that at the very end of the last episode. It was like a cliffhanger, shocking ending. And so I'm glad that we're continuing with these storylines and we finally get to see what's going to take place. Now, of course, we ended up finding out that it was the DEA that stopped Rue. So the DEA is interrogating Rue in the interrogation room. And man, it was at this point in the episode, you know, right when it started, that I'm just thinking, why doesn't Rue have a lawyer? Why hasn't Rue asked for a lawyer? Why hasn't she been prepped on this potentially taking place? Because she's operating in the criminal world, so we know that something like this can more than likely happen to her. Alamo Brown should have been prepped her on all of this and should have had something already set in motion in case this did happen. He should have a lawyer on standby, but nonetheless, okay, she's not smart enough to ask for a lawyer. She immediately folds in the interrogation room, and turns out they ended up finding a picture of her in Mexico. All right, they lied to her about it. They ended up finding drugs in her car. They lied to her about it just so that she says the wrong thing and ends up lying to them. And then they could say, that's another charge. You lied to a DEA officer or agent or whatever you'd like to call them. Rue is in very big trouble. She's in the hot seat and she's pretty much left no choice outside of to begin ratting. Okay, so Rue flips. She turns into an informant. She turns into a snitch. And I really didn't expect this here, but it's like, what else can we really expect out of the Rue character? And it just seemed to all happen so fast. And so from the remainder of this episode, we are just watching Rue trying to catch Alamo Brown and other people involved in his organization for the DEA so that she can get off as an informant. Now, when Rue makes her way back to the strip club, to Alamo Brown's club, she is extremely suspicious already. All right, you could already tell that something is wrong with her. She's interacting with everyone weird. She's having weird dialogues and conversations. All of her mannerisms, nothing about it is natural. So immediately out the gate, you already know this character is going to get caught and found out in some sort of way by this criminal enterprise that she has surrounded herself with very soon. Now, everyone's saying Rue looks terrible. She probably hasn't showered. She probably left from the precinct, got dressed, and went right to work for the DEA as an informant at the strip club. And on top of that, she has extremely nervous energy throughout all of these scenes. And honestly, Zendaya was doing a fantastic job portraying this inside of the character of Rue. Now we move over into Nate and Cassie. Of course, we want to know what's going to happen with these characters after the insane ending of episode 3, which in my opinion was the best episode so far up until this point. And so we continue. We see that Nate got his toe sewed back on and Cassie is sort of treating him. She's taking care of him, but you could tell she's pretty much had enough of this guy and this relationship now that the facade and the fantasy has wore off. Now Nate ends up telling Cassie that he owes around $1 million to this guy now, and they are so in the hole that she pretty much just completely gives up on him. She goes upstairs, packs her bags, throws him down the giant flight of stairs. By the way, they're living in a very nice house, a very nice mansion. All right, I do not know how this ended up happening to Nate, which we do know it was the endangered flower on his, new project that he was building for work. But still, this guy was living the high life, and now he is in the hole more than anyone could possibly be. And Cassie's on her way out of there, okay? She calls Maddie to pick her up. Maddie's outside, out front, and she ends up taking Cassie to LA to now try and become this big star. Now we pick back up with the character of Jules. All right, she gets a call from Lexi. Apparently they want to have her work on some artwork for an upcoming movie or project that they have going. And so Jules is very happy about this. She makes her way off to Hollywood. She ends up joining Lexi on set. They give her a canvas and pretty much say, create anything you want to create. And we should have known at this point that Jules was going to create the most unhinged painting imaginable. And that's exactly what Jules ends up doing. Now, as Jules is making this painting, we pan back over into Cassie. We see her getting this makeover. All right, Maddie's turning her into this star, into this celebrity type of person so that they can go off to some club and try and finesse Cassie's way into the OF game. Now, back on Jules. All right, her painting's completed. We end up seeing what it is. And I don't even know how to say this in a video. Okay, she created this big, beautiful artwork, and she's supposed to have painted a picnic scene. But what she ends up doing here, it really reminded me of the scene out of 2007's Superbad film, one of my favorite films of all time, in my opinion, the greatest comedy of all time, where we see Jonah Hill's character, as he's younger, have a lunchbox full of a bunch of drawings of dicks, okay? We just got to say it outright. That's pretty much what Jules does with this painting. There's like 20,000 of them here. They obviously can't use this inside of the show, inside of the movie, whatever they're creating. This is completely unacceptable, as any sane human being would come to the conclusion of. And Lexi's boss wants this painting gone. Okay, she's absolutely pissed off about the painting that was created. Apparently this cost them like $56,000, something like that. She ends up telling Lexi, due to the fact that they can't shoot the scene and they wasted all of that time for the day. And yeah, Lexi is sort of in the hole with her boss. She's in a bad place, all because of what Jules did. She tried to give her friend an opportunity and it didn't work out. As we already know, business and friendships do not mix. And now we move over into Lori's character. Okay, we know at the end of the last episode her bird ended up dying. Bishop was the one to poison her. That's Alamo Brown's like bodyguard or right hand man, whatever you'd like to call him. And so they're holding this funeral for her parrot, for her bird, and they're pretty much plotting of a way to get back at Alamo Brown. Now that Cassie's in LA, she ends up staying with Lexi. They're all having these conversations during Cassie's photo shoot, and there's just this hilarious scene where Rue comes up. She's asking for drugs. She's asking Maddie, like, can you help me score some drugs? Because Rue needs someone to rat on, and the connection with Lori and Alamo Brown is completely severed. So she needs to find a new dealer for her to turn into the DEA. So as this is going on, Lexi is completely disgusted. She's like, you're selling your body online. You're this weird online pimp. And then you're over here asking, trying to score drugs. What the hell is going on with y'all? Lexi is just this sheltered theater kid, and I thought it was a funny performance there and a funny scene overall. Now moving on to the next scene, we see Nate Jacobs plotting and scheming up how he plans on making this money and getting his business back up and running. He goes to this hearing for this endangered flower, and he ends up saying his piece like, listen, I've come up with a good plan. We'll just build completely around the flower. They could be completely untouched, and it could even be a part of this building for this hospice center that this company is creating. And at this point, he is just groveling, he is begging, he is pleading. At one point, he even literally gets on his knees and says, like, what do you want from me? What do I have to do to get this company up and running again all over this damn flower? His motion is denied, it's dismissed. They don't want nothing to do with him at this particular moment, and Nate is just extremely down on his luck at this point in time. Now, this was a great scene, all right? We really got to see Jacob Elordi's acting talent on display during this scene. I think this was his best scene so far in this season up to this point. And with that being said, at this point, I'm starting to feel bad for Nate, and I do want to see him succeed, at least on a certain level in the future. Now back to Cassie. She ends up getting herself an apartment right across from Lexi's, and come to find out, the trifling hoe hold on. This trifling Beezy sold her wedding ring so that she can get this apartment and she can, you know, sustain herself as she's out there in LA. And at this point, nothing surprises me when it comes to the Cassie character. She's a complete narcissist, and she will do anything it takes to succeed in her own sort of way and get whatever she happens to want. Now we pick back up with Rue at the club. She's playing poker with Alamo Brown, with Bishop, with his guys, right? Marshawn Lynch, whatever character he's supposed to be playing. And they're all playing poker together. And meanwhile, of course, the DEA has her bugged, and she is trying to steal weasel information out of Alamo Brown. And in doing this, she is making herself extremely suspicious. Alamo Brown picks up on this. He starts even calling her like, are you a rat? Like, I've seen that look in your eyes before. You must have turned into an informant or something, he's saying. She's completely denying it. And then he gives her an out almost. He says, I know what it is. You must be back on the drugs. You must have relapsed. And she admits that she did relapse, which we know is not really the case. Like, she's sort of on and off, but she's not as in the hole as she was with drugs like she was in season 1 and season 2. But with Alamo Brown giving her this out in this conversation, she ends up taking it. He pretty much says, listen, put it down or you're going to end up dead, because that's the only place hard drugs lead you. And that's pretty much what we got to see there in that scene. They are all on 10 when it comes to Rue's character. Now, this is where the title of this episode comes into play, because of course this episode is titled Kitty Loves to Dance, or Likes to Dance, and the new character of Kitty ends up coming to the club to replace Angel. That is the character that Rue drove off to the rehab center to never be seen again. I have a whole nother tangent about that. Okay, we'll definitely talk about Angel's character and what's potentially happening with her. But before we do that, let's talk about Cassie and Maddie and this scheme that they came up with. All right, so they're headed off to some celeb's house. Apparently this guy has like 20 million Instagram followers, and their whole scheme is get Cassie on camera in some capacity near this guy or on his Instagram, something of that sort, so that she could be seen as associated with him and start building up a following of her own, so that of course that can eventually transfer over into a career for her. Now Maddie is gaming Cassie up. She's letting her know, like, listen, do not trust any of these girls you meet in this club. Do not trust anyone at all. Just do as I say. Do not even end up sleeping with this guy. Just tempt him. Because if you end up sleeping with him, he's not going to want anything to do with you afterwards. And so she understands and she starts playing the game. But one mistake that Cassie ends up making is that she ends up telling some other girl in the club that Maddie is her manager. And now this girl is seemingly a little suspicious of her, but still is just going along with it. And Cassie gets to work. Okay, she hops up on the table. She starts making a big scene. She gets noticed by this guy that she wanted to get noticed by, this celebrity, right at his house. And this guy ends up taking Cassie to a room upstairs with this other girl so they could have a little more fun. All right, and the whole time this is happening, Maddie is keeping an eye out on her. She's sort of following her from a close distance, making sure that her investment is safe at this point in time. And so she is trying to break into the room as they're doing all of this different, drugs, stuff like that inside of the room. And simultaneously, while all of this is going on, it pans back over to Rue at the strip club. She's like watching the monitor. She's seeing that these strippers are pretty much being prostituted out and things like that, especially this new one that they just invited to the club, Kitty. She's getting like turned out. And so Rue is distraught, and she's realizing that she's surrounded by some pretty bad people finally at this point in time. Now back to the famous dude's house and the party that they're having. Cassie once again is telling this girl, like, yes, Maddie reps me. And the girl finds this very weird, but she's so drugged out of her mind and so idiotic in her own way that she doesn't even care. All right, and so Cassie's having a fun time. The girl ends up getting sick from the drugs, so she runs off into the other room. Now Cassie has a one-on-one with this guy that she really came for, and as soon as things are about to go down, right, Maddie ends up getting the lockpick to the room. She ends up getting in there and getting it on camera, Cassie and this other dude doing various activities with each other, and then Cassie shouts out her Instagram. So pretty much everything went to plan, and they succeeded with this finesse that they were trying to hit. Now back at the club, Rue is interrogating this stripper that she's seen on the monitor. She's asking her, like, listen, are you being forced to do these things? Do you need help? Anything like that? And then it turns out while they were asking this, someone else was nearby. This was all taking place in a bathroom. Someone was in one of the stalls. The stripper that we've been seeing with like the brace on her neck, she was in the stall listening. And of course she goes to snitch to the head manager about what Rue is asking this girl. Now Rue ends up accidentally leaving her phone inside the manager's room as she was watching the monitor, and by this point she left the club, but of course she has to come back for her phone. And that's when we see Rue get interrogated about the questions that she's been asking. And while this interrogation is going on by the strip club's manager, she gets a call on her phone from Mom. Now Mom is this fake number, pretty much it's the DEA. They're giving her a guide on the phone, like, listen, say this, do that, and you're going to be okay. And she follows suit. She says, like, oh, it's my grandma on the phone. I gotta go talk to her, gotta see if everything's okay. And that pretty much gave Rue a way out of this conversation so that she didn't get caught then and there for her wrongdoing. And from then on, she starts fighting for her life. Okay, she's arguing with this stripper who has snitched on her. She's saying, you're gonna trust this hood rat over me, over someone who's been working for you, this drug addict, you're gonna trust her over me. And they're going back and forth, they're bickering. Like I said, Rue is arguing for her life at this point. And that is when we get the craziest scene in the entire episode. The strip club ends up getting stuck up by what looks like Lori's people. Okay, it's two dudes, two gunmen. They run in there, they run into the manager's office. They're holding them all captive. They're holding them all hostage. They're telling the manager, where's the safe? We know there's a safe. He doesn't want to say where it is. Of course, it's his job not to. And they end up threatening Rue's life. They put a gun to her head, like, listen, she's out of here if you don't tell us where this safe is. The manager doesn't budge one bit. They're like, damn, okay, you're a pretty cold dude. Bow! Shoot him, okay? They shoot him in his stomach, crazy as hell. And as he is bleeding out, they're like, tell us where the safe is or you're dead. So of course he ends up telling them, listen, it's behind the painting. They tell him go unlock it. He's forced to get up even with all the pain. He gets up, he goes and locks the safe for them. They get what they want and they make their way out of there. Now on their way out, it looks like a woman is driving this truck that they got picked up by. So while this dude's bleeding out, Bishop ends up saying, listen, forget about the bleeding out manager. Look at the security cameras, tell us who did this so that we can go after them. Do you see a license plate? Do you see a face? Do you see anything like that? And that is when they get a still shot of a woman from about her nose down in the camera shot. And Rue's like, I recognize that girl. That's Faye right there. So she tells Bishop, she tells Alamo Brown, all of his guys, that is Faye driving the car. Her lips gave her away, right? She has these ridiculous oversized lips that have been shot up with who knows how many injections. No disrespect to this actress, but let's keep it real. All right, that's exactly what she had done. And that's pretty much the episode right there. So we end with pretty much Alamo Brown and Lori. They've already been in sort of like a cold war with each other, back and forth, but now it's full-blown wartime. All right, and for the remainder of this season, I think that's what we can expect to see. These two sides going to war, trying their best to kill each other, as Rue is in the middle of it as an informant for the DEA, doing her best to get information and give information so that she could save her own ass and not get caught up with the DEA. So that's the episode right there. In my opinion, it was pretty good, okay? Like I said, I think the episode before episode 3 was the best episode this season so far, but this one was pretty damn good. We continued with a lot of the interesting storylines. We pretty much got a lot of the resolve that we wanted after all the cliffhangers from the last episode, so that was satisfying and it was extremely entertaining. I had a great time watching this episode, and overall I'm looking forward to the next one and looking forward to see what they do next in this season. So with that being said, let's go ahead and drop the rating for this episode. If I had to rate Euphoria season 3 episode 4, I would give this episode a 8.5 out of 10. It gets the 8.5 out of 10. A very solid episode. I think we can still get some high notes here, and it was pretty stacked. There was a lot going on. So those are my thoughts on this episode, guys. Let me know your thoughts on this episode down in the comment section down below. If you don't know what I do here on Dimmy Got ENT, we do film, TV, and pop culture based content. So if you're interested in any of this type of content, you're in the right place. Hit subscribe, hit the like button if you enjoyed this video. I'll catch you in the next one, guys. Peace.